Good afternoon and welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ted Sawyer. I'm the Director of Research and Education here at Bullseye, and it's my pleasure to introduce this afternoon's speaker, Sibylle Peretti. Sibylle has been with us as an artist in residence since, that would be November. You arrived the 12th, but you really started on the 14th.
Yes, so I'm in my last week now.
Oh, so we're in Sibylle's last week. Sibylle grew up in Germany and was surrounded by traditional glass-making methods. Got a degree as a glass designer from the Glassfachschule in Zwiesel. Did I get it right?
Very good, Ted.
All right. And then after that realized that she wanted to do something more with glass than what she saw happening at that particular level. So she went to the Fine Art Academy in Cologne and got a degree in sculpture there. And at some point, about 20 years ago, she moved to the United States, specifically to New Orleans, where she makes her work. And we're thrilled to have her here. She's going to show us some things about her background and what drives her work, and images of a lot of the work. And then when we're done in here, we're going to go next door and just take a look at the sorts of things that she's been doing during her residency. So it'll be probably about 25 minutes in here, maybe a little bit longer. Then we'll get to stretch our legs, go next door, and see what she's up to and ask questions. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Sibylle Peretti.
So first of all, I'd like to thank you to come out on a Sunday afternoon, and I even witnessed a little sunshine today. So I expected nobody would show up. So I'm very happy that you guys are here. And I have to say, this residency at the Resource Center, it's amazing, and I have a great time here. Everybody, it's overwhelming, helpful, and friendly. I had time to develop new ideas, which I, of course, continue when I'm back home. But I also tried out new things. I started to use, or look at least, at color for my wall panels, what I never did before, and did some experimentation and looking forward to maybe use colored glass. I mean, very light colored glass in the future. And another amazing experience is that I'm right here where the glass is also made. And normally I experience my glass when it comes in a box, you know, with the UPS shipping, and you open it, and of course you treat it like gold, you know, it's like so valuable. But I never had the chance to come here and really see who makes it and how much effort is put into even creating the glass and make it also so predictable. What I think as an artist is very important, that you can't take any risk to waste time or material to have a broken, let's say, sculpture. So with the glass I use, I found a way to make it almost always perfect. So, and I want to thank everybody here who is working for Bullseye and helped me. Yeah, and here I am. And let's start. So most of my work focuses on sculptures and wall pieces made out of glass. And today I will try to explain what's going on behind and beneath the glass, and why I have chosen this material to translate my ideas. So in my work, I always try to capture feelings and emotions. And I'm interested in art which somehow reflects our emotional existence. So when I moved, I understand from the inside, and my work I see as a journey. It's about confronting myself with the unknown to create intimate spaces, and also spaces I can reflect on loss, hope, and memory. So often I look back at my childhood and I see images and memories. I hear sounds and still smell the cherry tree in our backyard. So that's me on my little swing. And all these memories I see in pictures, and they're like visual fragments, and they all play part in my work. So I grew up in a very, very heavy industrial area in Germany. And this area is known for its coal mining and steel fabrication. And this was a typical neighborhood in the 60s where I used to be and play. You see our house. Not a very healthy environment, but we still had our fun. And these were somehow our adventure playgrounds. And this is my grandmother and my mom and me, and we were all the generations were just living in this one house. And I had one question, this weird helmet hats, were they also in fashion here in the 60s? Okay. I was really curious when I saw this photo again. They're very practical, they just look kind of bizarre. So most people would think that these kind of landscapes are depressing and not very beautiful, but I do believe that places like this also make you sensitive. And somehow they make you also seeing the smallest hidden things, which are sometimes already beautiful, or you transform them with your fantasy, mind, and hands into something valuable and essential. And I think this is how I work and in which I believe. This wall panel is titled Vogelfrei, what means in English, free as a bird. But why glass? So all this started because of my dad, who worked in a glass production factory, and part of his job was also to travel to the old glass factories in the Bavarian forest. And this area is very known for its very long tradition in glassmaking. So when I had time and could leave school, I always tried to travel with him to these places. And it really still looks like this. The only bad part of all these factories is right now that they're of course all dying. But anyway, the mysterious and dark atmospheres of these glass factories fascinated me. And by watching the glass blowers, it felt like becoming somehow part of this fairy tale. And also, I was so drawn to this transformation of a material in such drastic ways. For me, it was pure magic. So I decided, what Ted already also said, and thank you, Ted, for this nice introduction. So I decided to go to the Bavarian forest and attend the glass school, the state school for glassmaking. And this school is located in Suiza. So everything feels very deep and heavy. This area reminds me a little bit at this kind of landscape. So, but what you learn there, it's really very traditional. You know, you go through all the traditional glass working techniques like enameling and engraving and etching. So it's not really that interesting. But at least you learn to become very sensitive to a material and to understand it. And like we all know, or most of you know, glass needs a lot of experience and feel to make it work and use it for your ideas and for translating your thoughts in art pieces. So I knew that this is not what I wanted to do all my life. I wanted to push the material further, and I wanted to find a personal voice in my craft. So I was very lucky that at the same time I met artist Irvin Eich, who is mostly known for his glass works. I don't know if you are familiar with him, but he's also the founder of the European Studio Glass movement, and he is a passionate painter as well. And at this time, I saw also his glass sculptures, his most known heads, and I thought, wow, you can do different things with glass. It doesn't have to be a functional object. So, and since Irvin had such a huge influence, I just like to show you a very short video clip to show you how passionate he is about painting. That's basically what he's only doing now. He is not working in glass anymore. So Irvin, he's almost 90 and he's still doing his paintings in his studio. And the studio is also part of a art summer school where students from all over the world come and learn to blow glass or to work with glass or to stain glass and painting. And it's more like the idea of the pendant school. So it's all the different medias are put together. And one more little...
You know, there's space for everybody. This is against the ego society we have, you know, just the money, and ego has to be fast and schnell and again. This is, patience and identity and communication. These are the roots for this place here. I'm very happy that we have this, and you people, and Tom was a great help, and you are very important in this summer school, in the school we have here, which is called Bildwerk. This is in English, Bild.
Image work. Mit dem Händen denken lernen.
Mit den Händen, yeah, this sounds good. Hey, it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Think with the hand and denken lernen.
Yeah. But this...
Learn to think with the hands. Because in our
society... So, I mean, he would go on forever now about society and what has to be changed, but the slogan of the school is mit den Händen denken lernen, to learn with your hands, to make art basically with your hands and proceed, through making something. Anyway, Irvin had such a strong influence, and he told me, stay away from glass and study just painting and sculpture. And that's what I did in Cologne. So I was accepted there and went there for 6 years. And for me it was just an amazing freedom after the very strict school I experienced in Bavaria. And I basically just did drawings there, and I did sculptural work, bronze castings. And all my work at this point and still until today, it's somehow about the human condition, and it also is about our reflection to nature, our relationship to nature, and the question how we fit in. It's also about our yearning to become part of it. But at the same time, we fail. So during this time, I somehow started to use glass again, because I did think it's a perfect material to investigate ideas of fragility and mortality of the human body. And it was for me, and still until also today, like an extra skin, an extra layer I can use to put information on or put marks on. So it just adds to everything. And since we all know it's transparent, you can look through, you can work all kind of different, surfaces. And then at the same time, I also try to break away from the vessel shape by just cutting it and breaking it and sewing it back together. I use glass as a container, or I use vessels as a container. I used and also still use a lot of domes in my work. For me, it's just the idea is nice that the dome shape protects the inside, so the scenes inside have their own environment with no need from the outside. I really love detail because it connects everything and ties everything together. And sometimes I also mirror certain areas, because the mirror is again a complete additional layer, and in this case of reflection. I mean, the mirror is reflecting, so that's what the layer is. These are more recent pieces. So, and this place was also very important to me, the residency at Wheaton Arts, the Creative Glass Center of America. And there I started to do my first kiln castings. And this place is also actually really responsible that I moved to the States, that I became one of these immigrants. And I'm still here. That's my first kiln casting, and no, it's not Bullseye glass. It was more like a homemade kind of badge. You know, we were just doing our own glass there. And I always was fascinated by the idea of Siamese twins and how they bond in a very bizarre way. And this, I think, is one of my first kiln castings in Bullseye. And it's the Jupiter blue and the clear. And this piece is titled Coral Girl. Now I wanted to give this piece this feel that she's somehow part of the ocean, and that's why I chose this kind of greenish, bluish tint to give her this kind of depth. And then more kiln castings happen. Boy with scroll. So just a very quick explanation, because people always ask me why I'm using children imagery mostly in my work, and it's very simple answer. I just by finding at one point when I actually went in Cologne to art school I found on the streets like a pile of old medical books, and they all were about children's diseases. So I guess like some doctor died and they just threw all the books on the street. And somehow I had instantly this kind of need to take them out of their scientific context and transplant them into a more translucent environment where they could heal through a kind of intimate and mystical connection to nature. So, and I started a series by using these photographs, and I titled the series Silent Children. And this is just to show the transformation. And it's not like that these children had like all like suffering, like terrible diseases. I mean, this boy maybe just had like some problems with his ears or something. But I also was very attracted to this type of photography because all these books were dated like 1930s, and somehow the photography was very dramatic, and the play of shadow and light was very strong at that time to use in photography. I mean, these are all kind of larger scale triptychs. So for me also, children represent innocence. They are vulnerable, but at the same time they have a very certain strength and power. And for me they also became sometimes like prophets who maybe know questions, who know answers to questions we have. In some of my work, I also include crystal inlays, and I play with the idea that it looks like a wound, but it at the same time has also a healing component. So this piece is titled Dorothea's Leg. Then the bee panels. For those, I used bees as our connection to nature. And then I started to use small glass plates to build larger scale wall scenes. And what makes sense, especially when you're using the hexagon shape, that you just expand and build bigger and more stuff towards it. And I actually do this right now here during my residency, but I'm just using the 10 by 10 plate glass sheets. But a lot of plates assembled to a large landscape. And we will later see this in the studio. Another residency I had, what was kind of also changing, or responsible for changing the size of the pieces I do. I went to the Kohler factory, and they offering also a little bit like here, like a residency where you work beside the production. And you also work a lot with the employees and the actually workers together to get your work done. This is just a view into the where they make the toilets and the what else are they? I mean, sinks, toilets. That was during a shift when nobody was there. So it was a place where I started my first full-size body in slip cast clay. And the work I did there was based on 2 cases of feral children. So I was very fascinated by these stories. And in particular, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar, but feral children are basically children who grew up with very little or almost no contact to other humans and don't have any social, really, skills and contact because they never had the chance really to develop them. And especially the story of Jeannie and Victor fascinated me. And Jeannie, you see on the left, she was discovered in the early 1970s, and she was confined to her room for 13 years. So she basically had very little, I mean just very little human interaction, but basically always was on her own. And Victor on the right, he was found in the woods, or in the wood of a region of France, where he managed to survive on his own until they found him. So both of these children had in common that they were used by scientists to study the human language and mind, with the goal of finding answers to the questions: can we, after we pass a certain age, still acquire a proper language? Or can these children still be socialized? And then, of course, finding answers to our biggest question anyway, forever: what makes us human and what is human nature? But also Jeannie was so fascinating because, first of all, she was hauntingly beautiful, and she had this ability to communicate and bond with people without spoken language. She had a very, when you see documentaries about her, a very intense, different way how to do this. So during my residency, I just made a lot of portraits of Victor and Jeannie. This is a view into the studio. And that's a finished, also cast body, because it's a slip cast process. And everything, it's glazed in just in white. Feet. And after the residency, I continued almost for 2 years working with stills. Actually, I took from a documentary about Jeannie. And the pieces were a lot about her solitude she faced in her life, and that she had for a long time only herself to communicate with. And these pieces were somehow all about the different type of communication and connection to nature. And I did a show about all these pieces at my gallery in New Orleans. So 20 years ago, and Ted mentioned this already, I moved with artist and husband Stephen Paul Day to New Orleans. And that's our studio at this time. The inside on the left and the outside is on the right side. So New Orleans is definitively the city I call home, or my home. Things are funky but very colorful. And what I love about the South and the area around New Orleans, including, of course, the city, it's full of mystery and decay and a very, very strange beauty. I just found that very interesting, these graveyards. I don't know, bye-bye. And then the daughter, she's not even buried, and she put already her stone there, and both gravestones basically assembled to bye-bye. I think that's just nice. Anyway, some impressions from the city. So for me, New Orleans is a city of emotions, and it's also a place which allows you to be romantic and sad, and it has a lot of tension and hope and strength at the same time. And I think this combination makes it so unique. And for me, it's a place I really love to live. This is like a view into our studio. So Stephen and I, we right now share basically a larger studio, and each of us has his area. That's mine. I mean, it's the usual chaos, creative chaos. And I just very quick, we also collaborate a lot on pieces or on exhibitions. And this one I show because we used very, very simple materials in this show. We used basically water-filled freezer bags and photographs. And the show was like a response to Hurricane Katrina. And we just took photographs of areas who were flooded in the city, and then laid like water-filled freezer bags, zipper bags over the image, and built this whole kind of pathway or walkway in the gallery. The same idea with a wall piece. And this is a very long project. It's basically ongoing, but we're using napkins for drawings and text. And, you know, napkins are normally just like thrown away and you blow your nose in and all this kind of interesting things. But you are amazed when you really work with a napkin, how many tissue layers it includes and how many options it has to add or also put your ideas into it or layer it slowly. You know, it's just this. It's nice to find a material that's normally like nothing and to use it for something, what we at least think is beautiful. But back to the glass panels. This piece is titled How to Breathe Underwater. I was always fascinated by that possibility, if we would have this possibility. And then I started to finally kiln form sheet glass. And I found it so magical that you can make out of a two-dimensional piece, you make a three-dimensional piece. This is laying on silver. But then I discovered the opaline glass. And I think Amy will know best when I started ordering it. And I'm completely addicted to it. I don't know if you are familiar, but it has this beautiful, it lays this like a veil over everything. And it has this glow in daylight or in artificial light, it changes. And also the white glass I started to use for my sculpture work. This piece is called Wunderkind. So they're all like basically life-size busts. And this is like a piece out of from my urban animal series, Urban Foxes, it's called. And this is actually my very first full-size whole body cast in white glass, but it had also an overlay of clear. And this piece was inspired by an old Russian fairy tale I knew from childhood. And in this story, one night, an elderly couple who lives in Siberia, where the winters are very long, builds a child out of snow. And overnight, this snow child becomes magically alive. But because she's made out of snow, there is always the danger present that she may melt down when spring arrives or warmer temperature moving in. So before that happens, she wanders off towards the north, and she's always kind of in company of animals. This story is told in a lot of different versions, but I stuck to this one. Of course, there's a very bad ending, but we don't need to know right now. So this is the finished piece, and the birds, they function more like that. The birds are protecting her and not attacking. Like some people see it like it's an attack, but it's the opposite. And this was the last one I made, and it shows more the process of melting. But now more about what I basically do since a year or so, and what is also more related to the work I'm doing here right now during my residency. So I had to travel the last 2 years back to Germany, to the place, a lot actually, because of family problems. And so I went a lot back to the place where I grew up. And at the same time, I was also reading an essay of environmentalist Marion Short, she's British, in which she penned the term edgelands. And she defines them as the interzone of rural and urban space, places which are unplanned territories. And she also points out that these spaces have a value as adventure playgrounds for children. And of course, immediately I was reminded at my own childhood and the landscapes I used to play in. And I started to explore the concepts both of Short's view and also of my own idea of what I named the land behind. For me, it's a space we create in our own imagination. It's the closest landscape to us, like a refuge, an escape where wilderness enshrines and reality conjures illusion. This piece comes very close to what I'm working on in the studio, using the sheet glass to build a larger piece. So for me, I also like to see these spaces, so I like to see them as spaces of memory and also possible solitude. Places where mystery can happen and wonder is present, and always beauty. And this was my first kind of hawk landscape, and I'm not using the landscapes I grew up in Germany. I'm now more searching for these type of places in Louisiana, and I start making them in Portland. So this is a wall piece what's also composed out of these squares, opaline glass. So I work the way that I take a lot of photographs, and I also stage some photographs, and they become inspirational, and I use them then in my work. So beads are obviously part of the Louisiana landscape. And this is something I started also here. It's like a landscape from the Mississippi River banks. And this will be a backdrop for one larger piece I do. But I change everything, of course, very much afterwards. What I'm not able to even do here because it takes too much time. Like, it's probably like 2 months I'm working on one of those. And I think that's all. I think if you have questions about technical things or other stuff. The question is how I apply the image to the glass, or kind of. Yeah, so it's because I know this question, I put this photo also up. This basically shows the back of one of these pieces, and I use the photo print, the paper where it's printed on, and attach it to the glass. I cut out a lot of areas so the light can go through. For me, the paper has the advantage that I also can add drawing, and I can add painting from the back. Does that make...
inside your dome, you had some images. A dome.
Yes.
Applied the same way?
The same way, but it's sometimes it blends more, that things become then more a painting again. I don't know, it's a very back and forward game. But it's the same way.
How do you attach the paper to the glass?
With a matte medium.
So an acrylic matte medium?
Yes. For me, it's the best way. I know that a lot of people fire the photograph on the glass, but if I would do this, I would lose this whole feeling of the paper, that I can also use the paper as another layer to put information on. This is just a step in between. After this, I would do a lot of drawings on the paper, and it actually shows also through. I don't know if that makes all sense, but it's a long process of really painting and drawing.
So on this slide, there is paper in all the squares, or just where the image is? The image of the girl.
Almost every square, besides maybe the one in the middle, you know. And the girl, it's actually turned the right way. You know, it's just like where you see the white, that's where you see the back. I just did this because I have to move it all the time, and I was completely fascinated by this look, and I thought I have to make a piece what looks like this, because I loved all the white paper cut out. You know, it's really like a strange, really more abstract landscape.
Now, you used a mirror image in some of your work. What did you do to apply the mirror?
The what?
The reflected surface.
The mirror.
Oh, that's just the classic how you mirror something. You know, you buy the chemicals and follow the instructions. So, and I'm interested in just mirroring very little areas, so that the mirror is very difficult because it can take over too much. And then your whole attention is just on the mirror. So I try to use it very little. I do everything by hand. It takes a long time, but it has a very calming effect.